Welcome to Talent Buzz. This is a podcast around SaaS talent acquisition, and today I'm joined by Ken Wary, Chief Operating Officer at Hostaway. Hostaway has scaled their team to plus 200 people working in more than 40 countries, and today we are talking about how to build a fully remote team, how to hire the best people, how to make sure that people are staying within your company. And let's start today's episode with a little introduction of Ken.
Born and raised in America, about 10 years ago, decided to mix my life up. I had been working in corporate American jobs, both as a consultant and an employee, including large Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies, and had gotten burnt out. I was living in Seattle, Washington with my wife and two kids, and loved Seattle, beautiful area. But we, again, just wanted to really do something seismic to our lifestyle, wanted to really shake things up. And we had, the year before, my wife and I had been on a running adventure in Guatemala. And so that's part of my personal thing. I'm a huge runner, love to run. I've run marathons all over the planet. So we were in Guatemala, and I guess this was back in 2013, and decided that, hey, it was an incredible culture. Love the language, but also the culture. It's not only Spanish, it's Mayan, and so we decided that we wanted to travel, and we had savings built up, and I took a year off of work. And my wife, two kids, and my kids were 5 and 8 at the time. We drove from Seattle, Washington, through Mexico into Guatemala. And we initially thought this would be like a 1-year gig, and we'd get right back into the grind of our lifestyle. And decided after about 6 months into it, we decided no, that the old life that we had was great, but not what we wanted to have for the next chapter. And so we wanted to continue to travel and live in a very nomadic, expat friendly lifestyle. And we continued to travel. And after we made that decision, we decided, we are going to need to fund the lifestyle and school our kids at the same time too. And so I decided to go back to work and started consulting back from my prior network in the U.S. My wife began homeschooling the kids. We began traveling all throughout Central America, and then later Europe and Africa. And I then took on a professional gig working for a company called HotJar that does professional web analytics and feedback. And I was there for 7.5 years as we continued to travel. We traveled with our kids and raised them in different spaces and places, and 6.5 years of digital nomading. The kids had lived in 30 plus countries, and HotJar had gone on to great successes as a remote first company pre-pandemic and then post-pandemic. And I continued to run. And we just did a lifestyle that was totally off script, but really, really worked for our family of 4. We're now settled in Portugal most times of the year, although I'm in Norway today. And Portugal's our home base in residency, and my kids are now 10 years older, and my daughter's looking at university, and and I changed jobs, worked for another remote first friendly company called Hostaway, and the short-term vacation rental industry, and just still loving life.
When we prep for this episode, you mentioned that you're now crossing 200 people mark, 7 people starting in the same week. So getting bigger and bigger, and of course changed a lot of things. But what is the most, I would say, interesting thing for me, working fully remotely? You have people in more than 40 countries right now. Like what's kind of your thinking over there? Especially we have so many different cultures and stuff like that. So kind of how to make sure that teams are working together? Have you seen some challenges because people are from very, very different backgrounds?
Yeah, the great question. And I was just checking the stats. 211 people as of this week in 43 countries, and and that is spread across Europe, Africa, the Americas, and Asia Pacific. And it does bring about a ton of different cultures. And what I found when you're working in a remote environment like ours, and there's many different types of remote environments, right? There's people who are like in 4 different offices, and so they all kind of feel remote. But we're fully distributed. People work from homes, cafes, co-working spaces, wherever they feel is most convenient for them. That's where we want them to work. And the most important things to keeping that team feeling is to make sure that you have as much equity across the team. In other words, you're treating everybody equally. You're not having 4 people in an office and everybody else remote, because then those 4 people either feel like they are the center hub of the company or they feel like they're the oddballs. And the more that you make everybody feel the same, you level the playing field. You just need a computer and an internet connection, and you can work for Hostaway if you've got the skills. And from there, then you separate the different types of aspects for communication. And you have to set a clear norm as to how you're going to communicate, where you're going to communicate, what that looks like, so that everybody can know the right rhythm of the company and the team, and you get an idea as to what's going on. So at Hostaway, we have a very deliberate, very distinct way of using Slack, and it is very regimented. We expect everybody to use it and use it in the same way. So again, we get this normalcy and this vibe of the company, just the same way you would be in an office. Everybody's at their desks, everybody's communicating in a certain way, whether they're going to meetings. There's culture and communication norms that are set almost by default, instinct in an office-based environment. And in a remote world, you need to establish what that looks like. And that's something the founders did several years back at Hostaway, and it's been continuously iterated as the company grows. You need to what worked then needs to scale differently. So I would say that's like super important cues. And then the second thing is core values. By having common set of core values, you know what behaviors are expected beyond the communication. We value transparency, we value critical thinking, and sisu. And these are all part of our core values that if we're not representing them, then our team isn't going to. And so we want everybody across the company to be leaning into these aspects so that there's familiarity, and you break down those cultural barriers. You build the internal culture of what's expected at work.
Yeah. I have kind of two add-on questions, especially regarding communication. And I know communication is very, very hard. We are now a team of 8 people within Talently, and I feel like communication is already right now hard when we are on the same time zone and all that. But first regarding the kind of Slack rules, can you give some concrete examples? What do you mean by having clear guidelines on how people use Slack? What does it mean in action?
It means, and we break this down as part of our new team member onboarding. It's documented and clear. We also ask that if you see people using it wrong, you help them use it right. Clear examples would be, you have your basics, like when you're having a conversation, be sure and use the threads. And so that allows you to quickly skim. I think that's more a basic and more common aspect, but we really reinforce that so that we can optimize our reading. What's probably more unconventional is that we direct people not to use direct messages unless it is absolutely needed for, say, it's a personal aspect. Hey, Sam, how was your weekend? How are you feeling? You doing better today? Something like that would be great. But hey, Sam, I've got a customer problem. Can you help me dissect it? We don't want that in a direct message. We want that to be in a public channel associated to that topic, customers with API issues or whatever it may be. We want that to be in that channel publicly to those other users in that channel, so that if I'm asking you for help and you're away from your keyboard, no big deal. Somebody else will jump in and answer it. Or perhaps you answer it for me, but 3 other people in that channel had that same question. they can all benefit from it. So it's something that actually at first doesn't feel normal. It feels like, hey, I don't want to bug everybody else, but actually you're not bugging, you're enabling everybody else. And so oftentimes somebody may, especially on the newer side, somebody may ping me and say, hey, I got a question for you. What about this? And I redirect them to a channel that's appropriate to that. So this helps with knowledge sharing. It helps with onboarding. It helps with communication, helps with transparency. If I tell you something but don't tell the others on my team, how am I being transparent and living our values? And so it's a really core piece that I think at first, I know when I first joined Hostaway as well, I was like, well, this kind of feels awkward. But once you get into the rhythm of it, it actually is very, very powerful.
Yeah, very interesting. Very interesting. But then maybe the kind of, I would say, very well-known thing around communication is, company meetings, whether it's, one-to-one meetings with your team members, Monday morning together with the team, monthly meeting. And I've heard a lot of interesting discussion around this topic. I think Shopify did some, calculator to their internal meetings, like, how much does it cost to have an internal meeting? And we just had a lot of discussion. Actually, last week we had our company summer days, and we had this practice where we kind of planned our week kind of again, like if we could start completely from scratch, like would we have the same meetings that we have over there? Would we ditch everything? And then it was very interesting to see different people with very different views on things. Because, for example, I kind of hate meetings, but then there are a lot of people that are kind of, I do get value from meetings. So how do you do it? Because, different time zones, like, do you have company monthly meetings or stuff like that?
Yeah, we do. We do have it. It's interesting. We just had it last week, and this was actually a topic we talked about at the monthly company meeting. So the practice that Shopify did, where they look at all the meetings, and then they started deleting a bunch of meetings. I call it meeting bankruptcy, right? You're just overtaxed. You gotta start from scratch, and that's got a place in time. What I find to be much more useful is calendar inspection. When your calendars start feeling like the game of Tetris, where you're just like trying to squeeze different things in different shapes to find in there, remember that no one ever wins in the game of Tetris. You can't win it. So you have a problem when you start seeing that as a symptom. So the first thing you need to do is diagnose why you got in that place. And this was the topic at the company meeting. Let's take a look at our calendars. I want everybody to take a look at your calendars. For any invite, if you are the host and the organizer, mark people optional if they don't need to be there. Maybe they ask to be kept informed. That's great. We record a lot of meetings internally. They can watch the recording if they can't meet it. Don't wait and schedule around for these people because you push out important decisions. Also, don't wait for them to show up because maybe they're not coming. So make sure you mark people as optional versus required. Make sure that you go in as the meeting organizer and be respectful of time zones too. Since we're geo-distributed so vastly, we want to protect the European afternoons, which is the Americas mornings. We want that to be the key time for collaboration. And so if I'm having one-on-ones with people in Europe, it's not a great time for me to schedule those in the afternoon because I'm going to clash against people who need my time at other aspects. So take a look at time zones, take a look at meeting invitations, make sure people are required. Secondly, if you're a meeting attendee, you have an obligation to, number one, pay attention to your calendar. Maybe you've got an invite, don't necessarily feel you need to go. Are you optional? If so, feel free to skip it. We want people to embrace FOMO or JOMO, the joy of missing out. I want people to get back to their work because, like you, I firmly believe that meetings can be a huge time suck, but they can also be a huge enabler. You got to find the right balance. And if you're attending meetings and you're not enabling, you probably shouldn't be there. If you're not talking at least 10% of the time, it's probably not a meeting that you're going to get great value out of, unless it's something like an all hands company meeting. In that case, there's different dynamics and it is a one-to-many type of conversation, but that should be rare. Most meetings should be collaborative in nature. And so we put forward these rules and published them internally on our internal wiki to say, think about these. If you're an organizer, an attendee, or if you have recurring meetings. If you're recurring meetings, that's also a huge time suck where you get into a habit. As humans, we love habits. And so you get into a habit of every Tuesday, we go to this meeting about X. But is X even still a relevant topic? And if so, did the company grow? Did you reorg? Are the right people involved and invited? We need to break the aspects of routine and instead have a routine of breaking routines.
Yeah. A very practical question regarding the all hands, especially. Like I understand that, for some team meetings, European afternoon is great. There's US people, morning for them, good time for you. But then if I, calculate correctly on the amount of countries, it makes sense for me that there is most likely some Asian countries as well. So how does it go? Are you able to still like have one company meeting where it's then, morning in the States, evening in the Asia, or do you kind of split it in half, that let's say half of team is in the US time zone, half of in the Asian time, so that there isn't like middle of the night meetings for people?
Yeah, about a third of our team is in APAC, and so Philippines or Australia, Sri Lanka, and so they are the ones that we tend to ask to watch the videos to keep up and to communicate questions and follow-ups on Slack. And over time, I think as we continue to grow, we'll change that dynamic, and we'll perhaps maybe do the same meeting twice if we need to, or have a Q&A, AMA on their hours, and different things like that. But for now, what's working for us, and it's largely because most of our leadership is in Europe and North America. And so because of that, we default to the current time zones for all.
Yeah, because I remember back in the days when there was times that in my last company there was, for example, a monthly meeting that I was unable to attend, not because of time zones, but just because, I was sick or something. And then, there's no way that I will sit down for 2 hours and watch a recording of other people being in the meeting. Like, no way. I'm not doing it. Because I think, for meetings, it should be around discussion or making decisions. If it's only about, giving information, then you can push the video recording for, some AI tool and get a, summary of points from there. So I think it comes down to as well on the fact what is the purpose of the meeting, whether it's, sharing information or discussing or doing something completely else, having fun.
Yeah. So some key things that when we share the recording, we also share the meeting deck so they can leaf through it if they want the information there. We share the transcription, and we share the chat as well. So there's different ways you can consume what it is you want to consume. I tend to prefer to download the video and play it at like 1.25 speed. So that also really helps with those breaks, and you can slow it down where you need to.
Yeah, good tip. But hey, let's move forward a bit to talent acquisition, getting the right people in. You've recruited a lot of people within your careers in the ups and downs of the tech market. And if we go 5 years back when you were in HotJar, everyone was competing against best talent. Hiring a lot. All SaaS companies were measured basically by headcount growth. Now for most companies, it's around really profitability, ARR per head count, and there's people knocking onto your door and stuff like that. How do you see that the kind of recruitment has changed? And if you now think about your recruitment strategy in the Hostaway, is it only about just put out the job ad there and wait for applications and pick the best one, or something else?
Yeah, there's never one size fits all approach in any market. Right now is a fantastic time for employers to be hiring. There is so much talent on the market, and many of them available to start super quickly. And I mean, we've had people that we've made an offer to, and they're like, "Great, I can start on Monday." And we're like, "Oh, it's Friday today. We need to get your account provision, payroll information. Like, let's wait a week." And that's a fantastic place to be in as an employer. It's an unfortunate place to be in, and my heart goes out to those that are looking for work, because it's extremely competitive for them right now. So I mean, I've seen the exact opposite, as you mentioned, where there was a war for talent. And just like Tetris, you can't win a war for talent, because there's always going to be somebody that's going to, outpay, outbid, someone. And so I think it's extremely important, whether it's feast or famine for the employer time, to make sure you've got proper employer branding and you really have your act together. You change your pitch as needed, but at the same point in time, you got to show that you are a good place to work. You're not a body shop that's just going to churn through people, that's just trying to fill a seat. You're in it, and Hostaway's perspective, another one of our core values is we're in it for the growth, because we believe that humans get the best fulfillment through their growth. And in return, the business gets the best benefit through that growth. And then we then share through our employee stock options with every single person, regardless of geography. So you have to have that story. You have to be able to unpack that for talent, whether it's feast or famine. Of look, if you want to join a team that really is in it, and if you are wired in this way, this is the reason why you want to join this company, because we do believe in our employees. We do give back to them when they give back to us. It's a mutual relationship of respect that both of us want to stay aligned to. And there's a lot of companies out there that don't operate that way, don't have a track record of that. And you can see it on Glassdoor, you can see it on other places. And so by having all of these cards lined up, you tell a better story, and you can make sure it's believable and real, and candidates will sniff it out. And so I think that's probably the biggest key that I would say, regardless of what the environment looks like.
Yeah. And I think, regarding what the environment is, if we think it from the company perspective, I think the job of a company is to look for the best possible talents within that market situation. And I think it's always about demand and supply. And currently we have a lot of supply of people, so that kind of means that companies are maybe able to get even better talents easier, with better, or kind of with lower salaries that they were used to 2-3 years ago. So I think it's also about finding the best talents within the market.
No, that's a great situation. That's something that's really interesting right now too, is the salary expectations of candidates. They are going down, and which also then allows a company to revisit their compensation philosophy and approach, not to try to get somebody at the best, cheapest rate, but to make sure you're paying market value, because the market value got inflated. And so we're seeing this. We just did a compensation research across the market, and when you look at data that's 2 years ago versus data that is today, you see a marked difference.
You do
in position, and it's not just the candidate expectation; it's the market dynamics right now. It's very interesting.
Yeah, and I think as you mentioned, it's all about, at least for us, like I want always us to pay fair market salaries, maybe a bit over that one, to get the best people, but I think there's no point on paying more than you can get from the market. It just doesn't work from an economic perspective. But what's your thinking on that one? Because I think this is very, very interesting topic. Imagine that you've hired developers to your team 3 years ago in let's say the US, and you are paying, let's say, $200,000 a year, and you hired 10 of them, and those people are still working with you, they are happy, and now the market rate has gone down, and let's say you can get a person with $150K a year. Then you bring in that person within the company, same skill set, brings the exact same value, but the hiring point was different. Like, should you pay, and now we go to the transparency you mentioned earlier, should we pay that person actually the same that the rest of the team is earning, because it's fair and you can be transparent about that one? Can you lower your current team salaries from 200K to 150K a year because market rates has gone down? I think it's very, very tricky question, but what's your thinking on that one?
Wow, that is one ugly situation, and I would say, fortunately, Hostaway is not in that situation where we've had to face that. As the company has grown and scaled, so has our ability to be able to afford higher talent at a higher price point. And so I would say, from a growth perspective and journey, we've actually been right on the way where you would want it to be, so we don't have to face that. So it's more of I can answer it from more of a philosophical perspective than, I guess I look at it this way. If somebody's been working with you for 2 years, you know what they're fully capable of, and they are likely more valuable because of the institutional knowledge they have. So at least from the onset, you can make the logical argument and rationality that there should be some differentiation. But once that new talent starts, if you see an unparalleled movement where maybe the legacy talent doesn't have quite the same skills as the new person, then you do need to, consider you are faced with these questions in a true reality. I think at that point you do need to start inspecting what you expect. Did this new person coming in raise the bar, and maybe the person that's been here for a while actually isn't as good as you thought they were? Maybe there is a mismatch on your talent needs versus supply, and that drives one aspect. But there are other. I would also say there are other different levers to pull in the situation of talent A versus talent B in that scenario. If you feel the need to compensate the new person different, somehow. Is there a way you can do it through equity? Is there a way you can do it through vacation balance? Is there a way you can do it through, number of options or bonus or anything like that? So I would say it really gets down to a case-by-case scenario in that situation. But I wouldn't necessarily always assume that the new person coming in at the lower salary is the wrong thing for both the business and the individual. You got to assess it.
Yeah. And then I think what's very interesting as well is regarding the location. Earlier you mentioned it's enough that you have a place to work and a laptop, but still I assume that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm quite sure you pay people in the US more than you pay in the Philippines. And that's I think that's quite straightforward, and I think most companies do that one. That it's also around living expenses and the market rates. But what makes it very interesting is what happens when your software developer from the US moves to Philippines. What happens to the salary? And I think that's very very tricky question. I've been thinking about that one a lot, and talking about that topic with a lot of customers as well, because it's never easy.
No. So at Hostaway, we do base our salaries based on geo, and sometimes that geo can be actually, you think about the U.S. to the Philippines, but what if you stay within Europe? What about moving from Albania to Germany, right? There's a big cost difference there, and but I think it's even in the same time zone, right? So you start, there's different scenarios. And so what we've done is we've developed an internal criteria of, if you're looking to move within your own country, great, just let us know your new address. But if you're looking to move to a different country, you need approval. And what that approval looks like is we look at several different dynamics, such as, should the salary be rebaselined? And if it's, it starts with, does this move make sense? Are you going to disrupt things from a time zone perspective? If you're going to move from the US to the Philippines, your time zone is going to majorly shift. Should your team even, can your team and the business even support that? Number two, does it make business sense? Is there a business rationale that makes sense for you to move from country A to B? And we've done this several times where we've had team members and we've even helped with visa sponsorship, because there's true business value in having them move, as well as increased business costs to having them move. But it's all about the ROI, right? And so, and then lastly, what does this do from a compensation perspective? If they're moving to a more expensive country, then we really have to make sure there's a business justification. And so if you're moving from the Philippines to the United States, your salary is going to increase tenfold or what have you. There needs to be a business justification for it. But if you're moving from the US to the Philippines, there's less of a need of a business justification if the hours work, if you will. but we are going to need to lower your salary, by that same factor. And so therefore it turns into a conversation between the employee and their leadership to say, are you willing to take this pay cut, or is the business case exist for us to pay an additional cost for your move or sponsorship in a rare case?
Yeah.
So in other words, there's no auto approval,
Yeah.
except for in the same country.
And it's weird. It is a tricky one, and I kind of understand both sides. From company perspective, I understand that one, but then at the same time, from employee perspective, it's always you kind of feel weird. Like, for example, for a developer, you are like paying for the value that person is bringing to your company, and does that value change somehow when moving from country to country? Of course, if time zone changes, teams change, there is a lot of things that are very, very interesting.
Oh, it is, and there are remote companies who don't geo base their salary for that exact reason of cost. The business is going to get the same value of me dependent upon wherever I write my code. But if it increases your business costs to get that code, then is that also fair to the company? So our perspective is no, it's not fair to the company, and this is a partnership, a two-way street between both parties.
Yeah, exactly. But hey, lastly, I would like to talk a bit about people retention, and I still remember back in the days when COVID started, and I was working as a head of sales in a marketing agency, and over there we had built a culture on office culture. People were a lot in the office, done a lot of stuff together, and then suddenly going remote first, and all the leadership aspects that we had were built around being in the same place, and then we try to use the same principles in order to have people remotely, and there was some challenges with people retention and stuff like that. But now running plus 200 people, a lot of countries, have you faced some challenges with retention? And there's of course I think a lot of things around leadership, onboarding, how you can affect retention, but then there's also I think hiring the right people, not overselling the opportunity for everyone. And when we prep for this call, you mentioned that in your opinion retention is even more important than recruitment itself.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that retention should always be top of mind for any company, remote or in office, and the challenges are not dissimilar. You want to make sure that you're taking care of your team. You're making sure you identify your top talent. So if there's additional aspects you want to take for retention there or career development and growth, you focus that. So those are just common core principles that you want to tackle. The dynamics then begin to shift a bit, because in the office you can see physically much more readily if you think somebody's engaged. Are they walking around the halls with their head down? You're not going to see that in somebody's home. So you have to tune your filters a bit different to make sure you're aware of kind of the general vibe and ethos of your team, which includes asking them, right? How are you doing today? And you seem a little bit off, and really having those conversations a bit more deliberately and directly. But you can also pick up on other aspects of, all of a sudden, are they, coming to meetings late? Again, you can see that in the office too, but it's a little bit different because they're not in the room. You're looking at somebody's, icon in Zoom or what have you. The other aspects are, all of a sudden, are their cameras off? What's going on? There is a shift. There's a change in those micro dynamics, just like maybe somebody coming into work a bit more disheveled. And so the filters change, but they still exist. So it's a matter of tuning your awareness to whatever the new filters are. Are they away from their keyboard a lot? Is their status on Slack offline? All these different things are just different tells, or they're new forms of nonverbal communication.
And that's a wrap for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. Hopefully you got a lot of good ideas about SaaS talent acquisition. If you enjoyed the episode, feel free to share it on your social so others can hear it too. And if you have a topic in mind that you would like me to cover in this podcast, share it with me as well. I'm Samuli, CEO and co-founder in TalentBee, where we help fast-growing SaaS companies in their talent acquisition. Make sure to follow us, make sure to follow this podcast, and have an awesome week. Bye-bye.